うん。
はい。
はい。それではお時間になりましたので、そろそろ始めさせていただきます。それでは、京都大学および S&R 財団の共催によるウェブセミナー、京都大学からの提言を開始させていただきます。第4回目となります今回は、困難な時代の好奇心と勇気と題し、21世紀におけるグローバルな課題について、対立を乗り越え、調和の取れた形で共存・共栄していくためには何ができるか、皆様と一緒に考えていきたいと思います。本セミナーには、世界中から現在300名を超える皆様にご参加いただいています。本日はご参加いただき誠にありがとうございます。はじめに注意事項をご説明申し上げます。本セミナーは2部構成になっており、はじめの45分間はスピーカーのお二方による対談を行い、その後15分程度質疑応答の時間を設けております。参加者のマイクはあらかじめミュートに設定させていただいておりますが、ご質問はZoom の、画面下部下の方の、Q&A ボタンからお送りいただけます。ご質問は対談中も随時受け付けておりますので、多数のご質問をお待ちしております。本セミナーは S&R 財団の Facebook ページでもライブ配信しており、また後日、ウェブサイト上での公開
on the Facebook page of S&R Foundation and will be archived on the website at a later date. The working language of the seminar is Japanese, but it provides English translation. Those of you
通訳ボタンを押し
who
て、
wish to listen in English can click the globe icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select your preferred language. You can press audio mute to exclude the language you do not need. At the end of the seminar, please take a moment to fill in the Google form questionnaire. Please leave the browser open to be redirected. We appreciate your cooperation and input. I would now like to introduce the two speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Kenichiro Mukai, Minister of the Embassy of Japan in Washington. As the Minister of Management and Coordination, he assists visit of VIPs between the U.S. and Japan, organizes events at the Japanese Embassy, and facilitates Japan's relations with American governors and Japanese Americans. He graduated from the Faculty of Law at the Kyoto University and studied at the University of Michigan. As an Arabic-speaking diplomat, Mr. Mukai served in many positions, including the Deputy Minister of the Japanese Embassy in Egypt, and has led the first and the second Middle East sections, served as the Minister Counselor in Iraq, and the Counselor Permanent Mission of Japan to the United Nations, and the Chief Secretary of the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty Division. Since 2019, he has been the chair of Kyoto University Alumni Association in Washington since 2019. Next is Dr. Tasuku Honjo, Deputy Director of Kyoto Institute of Advanced Studies and Director Center for Cancer Immunotherapy and Immunobiology, Graduate School of Medicine, Kyoto University. Professor Honjo has served as a professor and the dean at the Graduate School of Medicine, Kyoto University, a senior advisor of the Ministry of Education, director of the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science Research Center, and member of the Council of Science and Technology Policy. In 2018, he won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for their discovery of cancer therapy and inhibition of negative immune regulation. He has also received many awards, such as the Order of Culture in 2013, the Tang Prize in 2014, and the Kyoto Prize in 2016. He's such an authority in the area of molecular immunology. Today, Minister Mukai is joining us from Washington, D.C., and Professor Tasuku Honjo from Kyoto. My name is Yoshiko Akamatsu, and will be serving as the moderator today. I'm a researcher at an American pharmaceutical company, AbbVie, and I'm tuning in from the Bay Area, San Francisco. Now let's start a dialogue between Minister Mukai and Professor Honjo. And please do understand that all the opinions being provided are in their private capacity and does not represent any official views of the organization that they belong. Now let's start. Now, be it COVID-19, environmental degradation, and the polarization of the US politics, in front of us is a mountain of complicating and global problems that is overshadowing the world economy as well. Professor Honjo said in your previous lectures that the 3 C's of curiosity, courage, and challenge are important for researchers. I believe such a mindset is crucial to achieve a harmonious future with countries with different historical and cultural backgrounds, which Mr. Mukai is trying to help achieve. While you have very different backgrounds, both of you studied in the United States, Professor Tasuku Honjo at NIH and Minister Mukai at the University of Michigan. Please share with us an episode or two from your days in the US and the impacts the experiences have had on your professional life. I would first like to listen to Mr. Mukai before asking Professor Honjo. Ms. Akamatsu, thank you very much. In 1990, I entered MOFA. The following year, in 1991, I was stationed in Syria, in the Middle East, for 2 years. And 1993, I had an occasion to study at U of Michigan for 1 year. So I moved from Syria, where there is least amount of freedom, to the city of freedom, the US. And Syria was a country you're prone to be arrested by a secret police. So the sense of freedom I enjoyed was beyond imagination. At U of Michigan, I studied Middle East studies at a graduate school because it is a very large students. 90% of the students were Americans, and the remaining 10% were international students, including Japanese, Chinese, Korean, or Jews. And in September that year, President Clinton, with Prime Minister Rabin, had an occasion to conclude a treaty of peace at Oslo, and that has been a great opportunity to have a discussion as to how the peace accord can be stricken out against this backdrop. In the states of Michigan, we had a large pool of students and faculty with diverse backgrounds, and we were on an equal footing when carrying out such discussions. I was the only Japanese international students, and all the other students were non-Japanese. And I was exploring how I can lead the discussion and how my opinion, which may be very different from others, can win an understanding in my classmates. And this experience has helped me greatly in my diplomatic career, be it on the United Nations international stage at the United Nations or other bilateral or multilateral stages. In Japan, in the United States today, it is more bipolarized and it is now becoming increasingly individualistic. But the fact that I have been able to understand diverse background has allowed me to gain a skill to strike a middle ground, if you will. So that I think I am an agent of harmonious coexistence, hopefully. And one of the major factor is my current wife. I met her at the U of Michigan. So that is another major impact my experience in the US has had on me. Thank you.
Dr. Honjo? Mukai-san, thank you very much. I now understand that you are very young because I was in the United States after I graduated from the graduate school, right after my graduation in 1971. So perhaps I can say it was half a century ago. For young people, maybe it is an era that is unimaginable. Back in those days, the Japanese economic power started to take off. For example, the exchange rate was 360 yen to a dollar, and it changed drastically around that time. So those days, every day I was wondering when I should exchange my money from the yen to the dollar because the rates continue to change. Now I arrived in the United States, and I could see that the economic power was very different between Japan and the United States. The American people thought that the huge amount of import they had from Japan had always been cheap and poor in quality, like toys. Sony. Americans believe that is Sound of New York. Panasonic is a company that comes with good designs, but Americans firmly believed that both Sony and Panasonic are American companies. That was the time. When I arrived to the United States, I went to Baltimore Carnegie Research Institute, and that is where I was able to see the class system in the United States, because at night there are black janitors in the building, and at night, late at night, we are doing our tests and experiments, and all the Americans leave the building. Then black janitors come in and they clean the floors and wax the floor till it shines every night. They pick up all the trash and kept the building squeaking clean. Now, many of those black people, they're very friendly and they talk to me, but I could not understand what they're saying. It sounded as it was English, but I could not understand their accents. That is the first time I learned that there were different types of English. And I was able to understand what those janitors were saying only after 1 year of stay in the United States. Now, actually, in Baltimore, I stayed for 2.5 years. Then I went to NIH in Washington, D.C., suburb of Washington, where currently they are the leader in all the COVID-19 measures. And I spent 1.5 years at NIH, then returned to Japan. Now, the 2 years I had in Baltimore had major impact in my subsequent career as a researcher. I met with Dr. Donald Brown there, and we had a very vague aspiration about diversity of immune system. For example, you inject corona vaccines, flu vaccines into human bodies, but whatever vaccines you give, the body always reacts and produces antibodies. And it seems that there are limitless responses, but how can you derive such limitless responses from finite human bodies? I had very vague aspirations in elucidating the mechanism, but Dr. Brown said, no, that is not the case. Molecular biology have come very close to elucidating the mechanism. That's what he told me, and that made me to decide to move on to that road of research. Then I went to NIH, and after I came back to Japan, I had worked so hard not to be left behind and have come to where I am today. Therefore, the origin of my research career was in Baltimore. Actually, in 2019, I received the Nobel Prize. After I received the Nobel Prize, Dr. Brown invited me to visit. And I thought that was a very good opportunity because I would be able to meet my mentor again, thank him for what he has done. And I was invited by the Japanese embassy there. I had an opportunity to meet with Minister Mukai at the embassy. The residence was beautiful. I had an opportunity to visit and look around. Then I looked for sponsor companies. I acquired big donations. I had a very meaningful trip. I'm sorry I spoke so long, but those were the experiences, the beginning of the experiences I had in the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Those are very precious experiences you shared with me. Now I'd like to move on to the main question. Now, diversity, globalism, and global leadership. I would like to ask questions to both of you. First, I would like to ask Professor Honjo. I hear that your laboratory employs excellent students and researchers from around the world. What would be needed to successfully capitalize on the diversity of human resources? Are there any keys to maximize the output of people with diverse backgrounds in terms of race, age, sexual orientation, or face? And if you could touch upon the challenges in the future, I would appreciate it. Well, I have 3 points. Let me continue. It's not just the human resources, but globalization of intellectual properties and fund about the future prospects. And the third question is about the Kyoto universities and other Japanese universities. In order to continue to develop leaders like you, what are the initiatives and education that would be needed? I'm sorry, it's a long question, but Dr. Honjo? Thank you. Let me respond to you within the range that I know or understand. First of all, my laboratory. More than a half of my members are students from foreign countries or postdocs who are foreigners. But that means that not many young Japanese researchers come to me because there are decreasing number of researchers who are interested, or young people who are interested in researches, and that is an issue. The concerns we have about the future of Japanese researchers, I have repeated my concern to the government and others. Now, this year, in the basic plan for development, the investment will be increased from 24 trillion yen to 30 trillion yen. And in the United States, there will be a new functions created for funds. In the American universities have endowment which can be used to promote research activities, but Japanese national public universities must go to the Ministry of Education every year and ask for the budget, which means that the degree of freedom is very much limited, and it's very important that Japanese universities move away from such limitations. When we consider globalism, and I could keep on talking this for a very long time, but let me be short. In principle, young people need to have the mindset that is more independent, and it's important that young children be taught of having their own ideas and aspirations. In Japan, the children tend to be very obedient and listen to others and look around to decide what to do. But that's not the case in the United States. And the universities, there are less administration staff members like David, and all the writings come in English, in Japanese. And it's the research laboratories' responsibility to translate all the letters or information, and that's a huge volume of work. Sending information in dual languages, internationalizing the administrative work will be important for Kyoto University and other universities to have international mindset in all their activities. In principle, I believe that what we should focus is not just globalism, because it is already common sense, but we need to believe that knowing foreign countries will be to know ourselves. And that will have to be the way people think without questions. And anything that are not considered on the global level would be considered as local concepts. And that's how things will have to change. Thank you very much. Now, Minister Mukai, I have a question to you. In the United States, society is divided over race and values with movements that go against globalism. And last year, moreover, Black Lives Matter was triggered by the death of Sir George Floyd, and they're now demanding a true change. In fact, Japanese is an ethnic minority. What do you think is necessary for more Japanese people to seek a successful career overseas and to demonstrate leadership in various fields in the future, or have foreign students be more active in Japan? In order to elevate the Japan-US relationship to a next level under Biden administration and help stabilize the international order that are becoming ever more complicated, what roles should Japan play? If you could share with us your thoughts.
Thank you. From the US to Japan, there is a JET program that allows American students to come to Japan and teach English for 2 to 3 years. But under the pandemic, we have received 4,250 applicants. It is an increase by 110. So many people want to come to Japan, in fact, but from Japan to the US, and also from the US to Japan, there is another project called Kakehashi Bridge. 400 excellent Americans are invited to Japan, and that is really an asset of talents. And Biden Center in Pennsylvania or other renowned institutions send their up-and-coming personnel. And these are becoming the pool of personnel or the human resources that can pay respect to Japanese culture and background. Coming to Japan, they realized that the two countries, in fact, share a lot. And we are happy to see the increase of these human resources that are also eager to find meaningful positions, be it in academia or in the public sector. And Japanese students coming to Japan, that I think should be increased in number every year. And SNR Foundation that organizes this event, Dr. Sachiko Kuno, who is also the director of the board of Kyoto University, the foundation invites 20 excellent students to Washington, D.C. for a short-term study program, and it's called Kingfisher Program. And we also have an occasion to mingle with them as on behalf of the D.C. Association of Kyoto University Alumni. And they're really energetic and aspirational. And I believe that such opportunities should be given and expanded. Japanese people have a sense of harmony, and Japanese has a characteristics that has a strong sense of perseverance as well. But those confident Japanese people should try to get out of the country to know the world better. In terms of recent US-Japan relations, under the new Biden administration, enhancement of the alliance and multilateralism are the focus to stabilize the world. And open and free Indo-Pacific is the policy upheld by Japan, which is also agreed by the US as well. And that policy has been transferred from the Trump administration to Biden administration, since such values as freedom, democracy, transparency, and freedom, these are the elements with which the US and Japan is trying to enhance the world's stability. And that also is a concept drawing much attention from around the world. And with the US and Japan at the center under this concept, we are hopefully creating a more stable and peaceful world. Last year, we had a full country summit via Zoom just last year among Japan, US, and India. Free trade or quality infrastructure or freedom of navigation, digitalization, or supply chain enhancement. These will be concrete goals. And freedom or the different conditions of each country will be respected as well as we seek this goal. And that is exactly the area where Japan can play a leadership role.
Thank you very much. I think we are behind the schedule, so let me move on to the next point. The next topic is the information literacy and an information-rich society, and I'd like to hear your perspectives from each of you. In the field of life science, the number of papers that are not peer-reviewed has increased explosively in recent years. Some urgent flash reports, such as those related to COVID-19, can serve certain purposes, but the number of publications that are withdrawn later are increasing as well. Professor Honjo, how do you perceive such a trend? And are there any advice for students for them to enhance academic literacy that are skills to determine the truth? The first question to Dr. Honjo. Well, the scientific papers, you say that they come in natural science and the liberal arts. The natures are very different in science, in natural science, physical science, very different from other categories of science, because physical science require additional tests, and examination of the data is relatively easy. And if you come up with poor quality papers or fake papers, that can be found out quite easily. But in the field of liberal arts or life science, it's very different. In case of human beings, what happens, all the events that occur vary from person to person, which means you will have to conduct a statistical analysis based on a huge number. Sampling some adequate data might enable you to extract the data that are preferable to your assumptions. On the other hand, medical science, unlike in medical science, after 10 years, only 10% of the paper would remain to be true. It will be only 1/10 of all the papers that can be demonstrated to be truths after 10 years. This is what Dr. Hayashi, my mentor, told me when I became the researcher. Textbooks and the research papers, you must always doubt the authenticity of the data. Of course, the level varies depending on which study you are, because in liberal arts, half of the papers are describing what you believe. It's very difficult to verify the data. The situation is different. In science, you must always be critical. You must always doubt whether the conclusion is true. You do not believe the result, and that applies to SNS reports or the news reports. But basically, I believe it's very important attitude to have. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Mukai. In the information-rich society, it is filled with conspiracy theories and fake news, making it difficult to tell truth and false. On the other hand, it is of a strategic importance to maintain a balanced perspective that is not slewed toward Western values to position Japan in a global society. What can we do quickly judge the accuracy of information and to make right decisions and take actions?
Thank you. First of all, what I think most important is to be exposed to the first-hand information. Opinion programs or press coverage cannot really tell you if the news is true or false. Even in the United States, liberalism and conservatisms are being increasingly polarized in the United States. And if you pay attention to only one of the two sides of the stories, then you can even be brainwashed and lose perspectives. So it is important that you pay attention to both polars and try to obtain a first-hand information. Suppose the press releases by White House or the State Department or statement made by the congressman, you can really be exposed to the first statement made by these entities without any addition. Another important factor isn't really about whether or not the information is true, but more important is the definition of truth. There are lots of disclaimers, and there are also leaps of logic. And the problem is that such leaps of logics are often considered permissible within a framework of truth. So the key here is to successfully define what truth is and what constitutes a truth. And ethics is very important in trying to accurately and rightfully define truth. It is not whether one can take advantage of the information or not. It is important to explore if that information can benefit all people. Japanese people with a sense of harmony or harmonious coexistence with nature, I think that that can be an asset for Japanese people to position themselves.
So it's important that you seek for a value that can be shared.
Exactly. This value of Japanese culture can possibly be a universal one. And I think that that is the sense of values that Japan has.
And unlike in science, there is no single answer. It could be multifaceted, so there must be difficulties.
I agree.
Thank you very much. Now, let me move on. Now, lastly, you are the experts in your respective fields. Please share with the audience if there are any keys to successfully making what you love your work for alive. We'd like to have your advice. First, Mr. Mukai.
The reason I became a diplomat is to avoid issues that can lead to wars and terrorism. There is another fact. I just wanted to be an ambassador of the sense of harmony. Since I was a grade school student, I really enjoyed visiting old tombs or relics in Kyoto, Osaka, and Nara prefectures. I was, in a sense, peculiar when I was a little kid. But that was the occasion through which I learned the beautiful coexistence between people and nature, and I have come to believe that it, in fact, the source of Japan's strength. The sense of harmony is also stipulated in the law, 17 laws set by Shotoku Taishi. And that is exactly the respect that you pay to the others in hitting a middle ground between the counterpart. And that I think it's a very difficult concept to really embody, but that I think is a very essential element of Japanese value system. And that is something that I just wanted to share with the people around the world. With different backgrounds in faith, history, and culture, it is sometimes difficult to transplant such a concept. But in an Islamic world, there is a sense of generosity, which I think is quite akin to the sense of harmony of Japan. And I was pleasantly impressed when I found these commonalities between the two cultures. But I think that that kind of commonalities can help build world peace. And American diplomats and bureaucrats also pay respect to this sense of Japanese harmony. And for the youth, please try to pursue what you believe and try to make what you love or you have a passion for as part of your career so that you can make a positive impact on the world. And there are lots of things, beautiful things in Japan that can be shared in the world, and try to expand your horizons as you also share good things about Japan with the people around the world. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Next, Dr. Honjo. Well, it's very difficult because it's all depends on who you are. But because we are Kyoto University alumni, I'd like to share with you what I usually do not talk about. I was at University of Tokyo for 5 years in Osaka University as faculty member and as a paid professor. And of course, currently, I have been with Kyoto University much longer, but I had been a teacher in 3 universities, and that's a very rare opportunity. There are people who had studied in different universities, but having an experience at 3 different universities is rather rare, and that experience told me one thing. Tokyo University is destined to be #1 university in Japan. Osaka University, well, it wants to be the world one in the world, and it wants to be deep rooted in the local community and active globally. But Kyoto University, it doesn't care. We don't care. How different we are from others is very important. Establishing our own identity is most important for the people in Kyoto University. And actually, of course, I'm a Kyoto University alumni, and I really love this attitude. Mr. Mukai talked about harmony, and of course, harmony is important, but if everybody is the same, it's not harmony, but it's just the sameness. Having your own identity and achieving harmony will be very important, which means you must know what you want to do, what you're good at, what you can do. Each individuals will have to think what they have, find what their strongholds are, and then find ways to make contributions for the society that will make you enjoy life. If you continue to work on the areas you're not good at, it only gives you hardship. So what is important is know yourself, know your surroundings, and have an enjoyable life. I believe that is very important. Thank you very much. That could be rather difficult. Well, now,
We would now like to entertain some questions from the audience. Thank you very much for very interesting questions. first question is to Professor Honjo. How do you view the international ranking of universities? Globalism and nationalism also needs to be balanced out. Do you want to enhance the Japanese researchers' research capabilities? I think that has many questions in one. University ranking tables are provided by corporations, which I do not really believe or trust. All those weighted indexes are discretionary. For example, Chinese ranking tables tends to have Chinese universities at a higher places. So these ranking tables, of course, universities are internationally evaluated. And of course, some departments, there are differences in rankings or the strength across the universities or between different departments. So annual fluctuations of the positions in ranking tables are not something quite meaningful. What was the other question? In order to enhance the research capabilities of Japan, do you think it really depends on the Japanese researchers to enhance Japanese research capabilities? As the pandemic has revealed, science not only brings wealth to the nation, it really protects the life of the nation or the survival of the nation even. Countries that can produce vaccines or the countries that can accurately diagnose the symptoms. I think that the capabilities are different from one country to another. Science is not only the source of wealth, but the foundation of people's life and livelihood. Countries without scientific background can be quite vulnerable. So just importing all the things you need would not suffice. The level of science in Japan needs to be enhanced. And I think that is critically important. Thank you.
Moving on to the next question. And I believe this goes to both of you, but first, Mr. Mukai, please answer. Global diversity, those are the perspectives. But in order to realize the future based on evidence, what are the aspects that are expected in academic researches, especially in liberal arts? Based on evidence. Well, in order to realize the future society which value evidence, I believe is the question. From the diversity perspective, yes, globalism or diversity, how can you value them? Well, I think I can only give you a very plain answer, but in the world, there are different people, diversity. So ethnicity, religion, values. There are people with huge diversity. And the history, culture, politics will have to be studied and learn, know each other in order for us to continue discussion. So such field of science, whether it's politics, law, or literature, liberal arts as a whole, psychology, From those perspectives, it's important that we study on a broad basis. Well, your experiences in Syria may have been very important because understanding culture to aim at coexistence or harmony in the future would be what you would aspire for. So religion and other aspects we'll need to understand more. Right. I was in Syria for 2 years and I stayed at a Syrian household for 2 years. I talked a lot with the family and I explained about the Buddhism, about reincarnation and other Buddhist concepts, and they did understand. And they have their own religion. The Islam religion also have certain concepts of reincarnation, and there were similarities. And having such experience had been very important. Thank you very much. Are you asking the same question to me? Yes, could you please respond? Right, this is a difficult issue because I have no experiences in liberal arts study or humanities study. So let me share with you based on my own experience. In the field of life science, generating evidence is difficult. When it comes to the field of humanities, human sciences, history is rather easier to examine, but still, if you are talking about archaeological history, and you may be able to find all the writings, and I do like history, so sometimes I read about them. But most of the research papers are like dogma of the researcher themselves because there are limited source materials and certain evidence could be interpreted in many different ways, or the objects and articles that are discovered could also be interpreted in different ways. And I believe this is the very basic question of what an objectivity is in the field of human sciences. And I believe that you should allow diversity. Different people believe in a different hypothesis or assumptions. And as we go along, new evidences are discovered, and eventually some theories will converge. However, the problem is that in the Japanese humanities science, as Mr. Mukai know, we do not hold discussions on the international forum. Most of our research activities are done in Japanese and discussed among Japanese. In the past, we did take leadership in the Oriental history study, but and Japan was having leadership, but our positions are coming down. And as long as we continue to only report the research results in Japanese, this will not lead to any global discussions. Of course, social sciences will have to be done on a global basis, but human sciences as well. We will need to make all the research activities more global so that all the evidence that are generated could be viewed based on objective interpretation. Thank you very much.
Next question. I think that this question is directed more to you. Openness of the science research and the confidentialities of be it patent or business secrets. How do you foresee the future going forward, ideally speaking? This science and technology is fundamentally open. So whether or not one can file for patent. It's not that they are hiding the information. You can obtain the information even if the technology is patented. The patent allows the originator to maintain the use of the technology for a certain period of time. So the information is open. I had an occasion to talk with Mr. Inamori, and he says that he wouldn't file a patent if he really wants to keep it a secret. Ceramic gem that Kyocera invented is not patented, but the know-how is not open, so it is more valuable than having a patent, Inamori-san said. So the openness of science and technology and the patent, these do not run into one another, but you are just retaining the right. But without this patent, the medical or pharmaceutical development, if I am to open everything and allow all the companies to use the technology, and then if I make it a competition, that can lead to an investment of about $100 billion. But you really have to set a priority between the players to promote the investment. So it is important to maintain a holding period of, if you will, and other companies can prepare themselves after the window period where the rights are retained. So I think that the patent system is quite rational in promoting science.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to both of you. First, I'll ask Mr. Mukai to answer. And this is a question from an alumni. Thank you very much for a very precious opportunity. I have a question about recurrent education after graduating from school. It's been many years, and I would like to return to a graduate school overseas to continue my research activities, but I don't have the courage to begin. Many people maybe like myself. Any good advice for me? Any advice? Well, studying over schools overseas to continue study after many years after graduation, it happens frequently. Well, in Japan, they graduate from school 22 years old, then join the workforce. That seems to be the very common flow. But in overseas, there are gap years where even while they're in school, they can take leave for a year, 2 years, 3 years, go around the world and come back and then continue study. That's an accepted practice. So even after you are in the workforce, you work somewhere and then make some achievements and then go back to school. That happens frequently overseas. So maybe you're older, you're already in workforce, and you want to go back to school in overseas schools. It's very common, and if you have social experiences, you're welcomed. So I encourage that. It's very good for you to go back to school. I agree with you. Dr. Honjo, any opinion? Well, I had established in Shizuoka social health university, and the capacity is 10 people, but 46 people applied. There are like doctors, nurses, and pharmacists. At graduate school, competition rate of 40 times as much for application to acceptance is very surprising, but that means that many people are willing to learn more. Now, what is important is what they learn in schools could be used in their career. For doctors and nurses, it is possible that the new knowledge gained in school can be reflected and utilized in workplace. But if you are in private companies, and if you're non-expert, would your new learning be best utilized in a workplace? That's the question. And if you are a public servant, if you are instructed to go overseas and learn, of course, you can learn a lot and that will be a good experience. But in Japan now, if you just make a decision to go overseas and study on your own, and if employed by the government, you could be in problem. So I think we'll need to come up with a new system in Japan so that such endeavor can be well accepted. Thank you very much. I agree.
There's another question to Professor Honjo. Pursuing your own path can give you a very difficult period as well. How did you inspire yourself and your team at difficult times? This is a question that I often receive lately. Sense of despair or sense of failure. Maybe I've been asked whether I have experienced any sense of despair, and I haven't. I have made lots of mistakes, and I was at a loss as to what to do with all the failures. But in natural sciences, having a failure is an information that the route is wrong, and that prods you to take another route. So it doesn't mean that all the routes are shut. So with all the failures, you are making a positive step forward. And that, I think, is the beauty of natural science. But in real society, in real world, failures may or may not be perceived that way. A failure can be a signal for you to take another route or another path. Whether or not you can perceive that depends on you. But at a deadlock, you may want to feel that all the possibilities have been denied. But I think that is a wrong way of doing, and that I think is something that can really make a difference in an individual. Thank you.
Now, we would like to end the Q&A session here because the time is limited. We could not answer all the questions, but thank you for your many questions. And the dialogue between Professor Honjo and Minister Mukai is now closed. We would like to thank Professor Honjo and Minister Mukai. Thank you very much for your valuable opinions and advice. We thank you very much.
At the end, we would like to provide you with information on funds and foundations. It will take a few minutes, so I hope you can stay with us a little bit more. First, Kasukuhonjo Yushifan, commemorating the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Professor Honjo has long felt the need to further accelerate basic medical research and enhance support for researchers involved in basic research. He has established a fund using the Nobel Prize money as the seed money. The purpose is to provide stable positions and funds to young and aspirational researchers. Also, Kyoto University's 125th anniversary and its fund, as well as Kyoto University alumni information, is shown on this slide. Next slide. After the end of this event, you will be directed to the questionnaire page. It is available only in Japanese, but it will take only a short while, so please take 5 minutes to answer to the questions. In addition, an email survey will be sent at a later date for you to answer later, either in English or Japanese. The result of the survey will be used as a reference for planning future webinars and selecting topics. Thank you very much for your cooperation. With With this, we would now like to close Kyoto University Voices Seminar, Curiosity and Courage in Challenging Times, co-sponsored by SNR Foundation. Thank you very much for staying with us till the end of this program. Thank you very much, Professor Honjo and Mr. Mukai. Thank you too.